In this presentation, I will speak about our educational projects, and it's a complicated task because we have a lot of diverse topics in education to study, and they all focus probably around three major players. Higher education markets, which are students, future students, and not future students but faculty. So in my presentation, I'll focus on our projects which are about students. So I will speak in particular about peer effects, social networks, and what we learned about peer effects and social networks in the last 5 years. So it's going to be kind of a historical overview on how it came where we are now about that. And our initial motivation in terms of research about peer effects came from our interest on the role of unified state examination test scores in student achievements. And the initial question was, to what extent we can explain our students' current achievements by their prior test scores? For example, their data in 2004, that's the first year where unified state examination was introduced. On ATC students demonstrated about 40% of first year GPA variation of ATC students could be explained by their initial test scores. And also, whether you are Olympiad winner or not also play a big role in your first year GPA. So that was our initial question. Then we decided to look on other individual characteristics which also matter, which could be social status, parental income, gender, etc. But after that, we started to be interested in what is the role of peer-related factors, not individual, but peer-related factors in current academic achievements on Russian students. And since HEC provides very good administrative data on student achievements and student characteristics, we decided to focus on mainly HEC data. And we studied peer effects in education, which are any kind of externalities in which outcomes of the student, normally measured by their current test scores, marks, GPA, is affected by either peers' background. So we are talking about the exogenous or contextual peer effects or peer outcomes. Then we speak about endogenous peer effects. Why data on Russian higher education are very good to study peer effects? Because some specific features of their institutional context provide us opportunities to study peer effects in a way that many European researcher or US researcher can't do. Why is that? Because we have the admission to university, which system is based on national standardized test. So for any applicant to any university, including university under study, we have some information which is comparable from one student to another student. And we also have a group of students, and students are assigned into those groups without any choices. So students can't choose their own peers. They are distributed in groups by administration, and that's fate. So these groups are formed administratively. And also the majority of courses are compulsory in first 3 years. So you are locked in with your peers for first 3 years, and you can't make any choices in terms of disciplines, in terms of peers, in terms of everything. So to compare us with something, we can probably compare us with military academies in the United States. So most peer effect research in the United States in this environment is done on the military academies. And we can compare military academies to HEC, which is good because we are more general classical university and we don't have any military department yet. So our starting point was to look on the peer effects in those exogenously formed groups. There is no biases, there is no endogeneity caused by students' choice because there is no student choice at all. So we look on the students on econ department admitted in 2009. That's the very first year where unified state examination was introduced in all universities in all regions in the country. And we consider study groups as a peer group of the individual. Why is that? Because again, you're locked with those 20 people for 3 years. You can't choose another group, you can't choose another discipline, so that's very dense peer group. How we measure the individual abilities? They measure by the previous achievements. For example, EEC scores in 2 obligatory subjects, which are national language and mathematics, and we also take into account whether our peers are Olympiad winners or not. What were our initial findings? Our initial findings suggest that individual grades in many disciplines and first-year GPA in general improves with the growth of classmate abilities. And what we also found, and that is consistent with existing literature, is that peer effects are non-linear, which means, for example, that high-able students benefit from the fact there is a great share of high-able students in the same group. At the same time, increase of the share of less able students doesn't hurt neither weak students or strong students. That's quite an interesting effect, and that is consistent with the existing literature. What might be one of the possible explanations for that? It might be, for example, explained by the fact that quite often peers connected with each other by some social ties, for example, by friendship, have greater influence on other peers than others. And also students of similar ability quite often form social ties. If that is the case, then possible spillovers from strong students mostly benefit their friends who are also strong students. That might be one of the explanations. So to move further in that, we wanted to know more about how peer effects actually work. For example, how peer effects are transmitted. Who are the transmitters of peer effects? Just the atmosphere, for example, competitive atmosphere, or social ties, or something else. And how to separate 2 types of effect. The effects of peers' current achievements, or from those related to peers' characteristics. In many papers, there is no clear separation of these types of research. And our second question was, what peers are most important for individual achievements of students? So there's always kind of peer group identification problem. What are the relevant peers? Are those students from the whole year cohort, for example, 200 students, or just group mates? Or probably group mates are not that important because some group mates just don't show up in classes, so then there is no relevance of them. Or just friends with whom you drink beers in the evening and discuss their important issues. Or not friends, but those students to whom you come to discuss your homework. Because in many cases, you have friends and you just discuss girls or boys, depending on the gender, but you don't discuss any study matters. So we decided to focus on those social connections and to see whether the social connections really plays a role in transmission of peer effects. So we run very simple surveys among the students, both in Moscow campus and also in Nizhny Novgorod campus, because we have colleagues working there, and students in Nizhny Novgorod are much more cooperative in the sense of filling questionnaires and working with us on the surveys. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So ask 2 very simple questions. One is, please write up to 5 names of your fellow students with whom you communicate most. And for the sake of simplicity, we call those people friends. We do understand probably they are not friends, but just call them friends. And we also ask them to write up to 5 names of your fellow students whom you ask for help if you need one in the study process. And those people we call helpers. So for each student, we have his or her specific social network. Then our question is, what's the role of those social ties in creating and transmitting peer effects? And we use the network regression approach, also called the special regression model, in which each student has their own peer group constructed from the either advisor networks or friends networks. And we are now, that model allows us to estimate both endogenous and exogenous peer effects. But the problems here is that since ties are voluntary, there might be a bias, because the friends you choose, the characteristic of friends you choose might be correlated with your own characteristics, and you might, for example, choose smart people as helpers and friends. So omitted variable bias then emerges if there are some unobserved characteristics which are common among connected students. Then you have a problem. But we tested for the presence of such omitted variables, and we are able to demonstrate there is no evidence of them. So we're successfully, in this particular project, successfully solve the problem of their potentially endogeneity. So what are the findings? Just one example, we find there is a significant positive peer effect from academic achievements, both of friends and helpers. And those are data for the third year students. And for the third year students, the peer effect from the study group in general doesn't work anymore. For the first year students, it's important. For the third year students, it's not just general peers who matter, but those are friends and helpers who start playing a major role. And for example, an increase of peer grades by 1 is associated with own grade increase up to 1/3, which is quite a lot. What are the other findings in peer effects in social networks? We find that different combinations between friendship and being a helper creates different effects in students' achievements. For example, we demonstrated students' grade increase with abilities of those friends who are also helpers, and those helpers who are not friends. But there is no such effect for those friends who are not helpers. So if you have friends, but they don't help you in study process, they don't influence your academic achievements. If you think a little bit about that, it's probably positive news, not negative one. So another step in this direction was to look on whether social ties and peer effects affect some students' decisions. And we start thinking about what kind of decisions students make during their course of study. And we realize that probably the first important decision, independent decision the student make, is the choice of specialization. Because again, for the first 3 years, you don't choose any classes, you don't choose any teachers, you just follow their obligatory curriculum. And at the end of the third year, you do your first independent decision, which is which specialization to choose. And at this moment, students probably don't have any habit of making any individual choices. And in this case, they probably address their peers and significant others to ask, what are you choosing? So it might be the case that peers affect the individual choice of students. And we demonstrate that exactly the case. So the strongest effect is produced by those friends who are study partners and those with similar academic achievements. So think a little bit about that in the way that you come to HEC, that's HEC data, so you come to HEC, you are by random distributed to some study group. So those people who are in your group, it's not your voluntary choice, it's your peers by accident. But those peers affect significantly your future life outcomes because they affect significantly what choice of specialization you'll make. I think it's a kind of sad part of the story. So we also demonstrate that reciprocal friendship ties have the most profound impact on the choices of specialization than non-reciprocal ties. Then we moved a little bit further on that and was thinking about that sometimes we can't measure personal ties, but in many cases we can predict them. And can we think about measuring the peer effects in those predicted networks? And to do that, we use data both on HEC students and also on their Campinas University in Brazil. Why Campinas University in Brazil? Because they also attract students through the examination, which is very close in the technique to unified state examination. So we compare two groups of students, Russian students and Brazilian students. And we are trying to predict peer groups and estimate the peer effects on those predicted groups. And we demonstrate that for Russian students, study group and gender significantly matter. But for Brazilian students, gender also matters, but the region of origin is important. So peer effects are provided by those fellows who are from the same origin of Brazil, from the same region of Brazil as you are. To move a little bit further, we found out that for some questions which are interesting to us, we can't solve them having just data in the statics. So we decided to look on their dynamic aspect. So why it's important to look on the dynamic aspects? Because social ties change all the time. You're friends, and the next week you're not friends anymore. You're probably were helping each other, and in the next semester you don't help each other. So you probably don't want to even speak to each other. So if we would have a dynamic data, it would allow us to understand how social ties emerge, why people are friends, why people help each other. And we can then move from observing some simple correlations to explaining causations of some effects. And also we might think about studying the coevolution of some dynamic variables. So we decided to run some longitudinal surveys in Nizhny Novgorod campus, and we started 3 years ago with students who were at the first year of the study, and we launched several longitudinal data. So now we have the data on the first, second, and the third year of the study, and we patiently wait till those students graduate, and after some time we're going to have the data on the labor market outcomes. So you need to be very patient if you want to study peer effects in dynamic, and you should be in a good shape. So why we are interested in that? Because we want to try to differentiate between two important social processes, which are process of social selection and social influence. Because there's a difference between them. Why, for example, students of the similar achievements are friends? It might be because of social selection, because students select those with similar academic achievements. I am good, you are good, let's be friends. But it's not the case of social influence when students affect their peers. I am good, you are bad, but we are friends, so you're getting better. So we believe that those dynamic data would allow us to differentiate between those two processes. So we currently address the questions on how students select peers and what is the role of academic performance in the selection and how peers influence performance of each other. And we use stochastic-oriented stochastic actor analytic model to do that and have some first preliminary results. Would be happy to share that with you if you are interested. And of course, you can see how students from month to month change their friendship and networks ties, and you can study that. So what is the future direction of our research? I would mention three of them. First are dropouts. If your friend drops out of university, that's create a future impact on your life because your social network changes. Probably you don't have any friend, you don't have him or her as a friend, as a study helper, and you also learn something from the fact that somebody left your study group. So we want to look on this direct and second order effects or dropping out. What we also do, we collect data not only on offline networks, but also on the online networks. Because a lot of interaction between students happens not just in the classroom, but through gadgets, computers, iPhones, etc. And people help each other and talk to each other, not by face-to-face, but iPhone to iPhone. So we try to understand what is the relationship between online networks and offline networks and how it works together. And finally, we're very much interested in long-lasting peer effects. I think that for most of the audience, our mothers told us in school that you should be very careful about making friends in school because those people in school will be helping you till you are 60. And it's very important to have friends from the very beginning. So we want to look on this fact and check it whether our mothers were right in terms of long-lasting peer effects on our performance, not only in the classroom, but as a labor market. Thank you.
Intensity of these connections and networks, the fact that students are living in the dormitory or in the houses around Moscow, or their own campus, their own campus.
Yeah, that's very important issue, and we checked that. We do have data on whether you are from Moscow or you're from regions and whether you stay in dorm or you have a private apartment. There is no any fancy results about that. And we don't use their detailed data on their dorms compositions because quite often students say they live in dorm and keep a place in the dorm for himself or herself, but in reality stay with a girlfriend or rent an apartment. So this data are not very reliable. But those official data about staying in dorms or with parents, they don't provide any fancy results. Any other questions? Yes.
If I understand it correctly, your study actually aimed at finding how any social networks among the students are formed. But could you explain, please, what is the relation with the students' achievements in terms of their education abilities, in terms of what they can reach, belonging to one particular group or another one, or it's not a part of the study?
Our idea in this regard is the following. Since we have the longitudinal data on networks, so for each particular moment of time, we have the information about networks composition for every student, and at the same time, for this particular amount of time, we have current achievements of students. We can, using some dynamic networks model, to decompose these dynamics into these two processes, social selection and social learning, and explain what defines what, whether grades affect networks or networks affect grades and in which way. That's how we do that. Yes?
So I was wondering why you limit the information, the data collection about the social network to 5 friends, 5 closest friends, and the network outside the classroom or outside the campus, social network of the student outside the campus may also matter, and these could be substitutes, right? So the in-campus network could be a substitute for out-campus network and vice versa. So are you intending to collect data on wider social network of students?
Thank you. That's an interesting question. We're already thought a little bit about that. For now, we don't, in our later surveys, we don't limit our students with 5 options. We just give them their long list and allows them to write as many names as possible. But about 4 to 5 names is the median number of names people write. And we don't think that we can't collect offline data on friends, because it would be impossible to get information about those people. But what we do, we collect data about our online friends, which are not our students of ATC. And looking on the share of students of ATC who are your friends in the network, we can estimate how active you are outside ATC networks. That give us some idea about whether ATC environment is critical for you or just as a part of your, small part of your life. That's how we measure that.
Thank you very much. I have a question about the further step of your research. It's very interesting to me, the long-lasting purifier. And do you have any understanding how you want to measure the outcome of this purifier? What the evaluation of is, whether this effect is positive or neutral?
The problem with getting the data from ATC graduates is that ATC graduates are already tired of getting data from them in the period when they were students. So when they graduate, they say no more surveys, no more responses. But we do believe that in the longitudinal study, there is kind of Stockholm syndrome emerging from the students, because like we approach them personally from year to year, and we do hope that once they graduate, we will be still in contact with them. And what we want to do is to follow their labor experience in terms of occupation, salaries, and everything. That's how we want to do that. Yes, last question.
So it would be a short relative with a lot of interesting things you said. One thing is, you mentioned in passing that possible peer effect is a competition. And then, a lot of other studies show that competition might be really important, and cross-gender competition might be really important. But the thing is, and then is the core of your presentation structured about friends, but competitors need not to be friends, even though they provide the important effect. So, did you look at some possible non-friends effects in competition, or planning to look at them better?
Thank you, Sergey. I think that's a very interesting question. We never thought about that in this way. While we are how people they feel about competitive and not competitive atmosphere, and I think it's a good idea to look at that. Thank you. So I think that we are approaching to the end of the session.
Just one very brief comment. It's probably important to note that in higher school of economics, they have this ratings within your peer group. Like if you're number 1, number 2, number 3, this may influence how people compete with each other?
Yes, it actually does, and there is some research on ETC data which really demonstrates that ranking does play a role in that. So, thank you everyone for taking part in this first plenary session. Now we have 1 hour break for lunch, and we meet at the third floor for our sections. There are 2 sessions, and then 2 sessions again, so make your choice, and see you in 1 hour.